Good evening. It was billed as the big event of the Quebec election campaign, a head-on confrontation before the TV cameras. For the leaders, this debate was a chance to persuade the undecided, confirm the committed. So who won and who lost? Well, the first impressions are in. Here's the National's Terence McKenna with a high-tech pulse of the people.
Just before tonight's debate began, our polling experts from the Angus Reid firm gathered a focus group of 35 Quebecers from all across the province who were not strongly committed to any party. The participants were each given a handheld device to register their reactions to the debate. Starting from the neutral mark of 50, they could turn a knob up to 100 to register approval of what they were hearing, or down to 0 to express disapproval. We tracked their second-by-second response with this computer-generated graph line, which moves up when the audience expresses approval and down for disapproval. Undecided people tend to be cautious and hesitant, so the line never moves really precipitously. What kind of statements win approval? In this debate, Jean Charest scored every time he mentioned Quebec's high tax rates.
We're the champions for high tax, bureaucracy. We're the first. We've got more bureaucracy. In Quebec, we pay the most taxes in all of North America, not just in Canada, but in all of North America.
Mario Dumont also won when he attacked the two main leaders for making too many costly promises.
Now we're promising billions of dollars. It's totally ridiculous.
Lucien Bouchard ran into trouble in his claims concerning health care.
What we did is save the healthcare center, because when we came to the government, this whole system was in peril. Why don't you recognize that your party, when they were in power, did not have the courage to undertake this reform when the time came to undertake it?
On the main exchange concerning the referendum, however, Charest found himself on the defensive about his own party's approach to the constitutional future of Quebec.
You know as well as I do that constitutionally speaking, almost nothing happened. Now, let's come back to your program. Now, I'm sorry to say this, it's a non-existent program. I mean, Mr. Ryan himself said that your constitutional program is non-existent. Perhaps I could define one for you. You know, Calgary, the Calgary Declaration. Now, as the Premier of Quebec, would you sign this? Or would you refuse to sign this?
I'll answer your question. But first of all, in reference to Mr. Ryan, I was speaking with him today. I don't think you're very well placed to quote Mr. Ryan. Mr. Ryan helped us in the deliberations of this program. Contrary to what you said, our constitutional position is in this document.
Well, no. No referendum? That's all you said, and no request for constitutional amendments.
If you allow me to answer.
You know, it's a perfect couple. I mean, one is offering nothing and the other one is requiring
answer your question,
nothing.
Because you quoted Mr. Ryan. And the positions that the Liberal government will defend are in this document. What we want for the next 4 to 5 years is not to establish the first priority constitutional amendments. We want to work on jobs, employment, that young families in Quebec who have difficulty making ends meet. We think that there should be change, that maybe we could work and worry about jobs and the economy. And then we will work on a social union. It's the social union we want to develop, a new way to practice federalism, co-management, co-decision making. That's where we'll direct our energies, to make sure that there's a social union that works.
Calgary, yes or no, Mr.
The Calgary Agreement. The Calgary Agreement is not a constitutional amendment. It never was.
Would it be possible that you walk out of this debate and succeed in not saying that you're not going to sign Calgary?
Never question Mr. Bouchard of signing Calgary. That is not a constitutional
So you wouldn't sign?
Amendment. You know,
Are you
is
telling
it a
us that
constitutional amendment?
No, but in its present form, would you sign it? Yes or no?
You asked me a question which was a false question.
Mr. Charest, please. Is it sufficient or not for you?
We've said. We have said we want to make sure that there's recorded in the court appointment 3 judges of the Supreme Court, the right of veto, the opting out with compensation, immigration, culture. And what we have also told you, that's not our first priority. And the Calgary Agreement...
Well, you said that there would be no constitutional demands.
Mr. Bouchard...
Will there be a referendum? Would there be a referendum?
You're promising the referendum.
A winning referendum, sir.
What do you mean a winning referendum?
There will be no losing referendum next time around.
Well, interesting. Joining us now from Montreal is Terence McKenna and Chantal Hébert, columnists with La Presse. First, Terence, how does this debate compare with other debates we've seen where they've used these same public reaction techniques?
Well, Brian, I remember we used this technique in the federal election debate in 1993 with Kim Campbell. And if you watched a debate without seeing the line moving, you would think Kim Campbell was doing perfectly fine in a lot of cases. But when you watch the debate with the line superimposed on it, you saw that every time Kim Campbell opened her mouth, the line went down. And every time Jean Charest opened his mouth, he might be saying something that seemed unremarkable, the line went up. There was a visceral feeling that you could tell in the debate who was winning. And in this case, it was much more a split decision, much more a stalemate. The line didn't move a lot, and certainly the consensus in Quebec was that in order to turn this election around, Mr. Charest was going to have to really tag Lucien Bouchard, was going to have some kind of knockout punch, and nobody seemed to be seeing that.
Chantal Hébert, your own reaction to tonight's debate.
Well, I quite agree with what Terence was saying, that it looked like a match that produced no clear winner. Although that last exchange that you showed about the Constitution and the referendum was a point match of sort for Mr. Bouchard, in the sense that he kept that ball going at Jean Charest on the Calgary Declaration, showed Mr. Charest for 4 of the 5 minutes that were allowed to that section of the debate and the crucial question of sovereignty or constitutional renewal as not wanting to answer, which gives the impression that his constitutional position is at best difficult to figure out. And only the last minute barely touched on the referendum. And there again, Mr. Bouchard very much in control. And I suspect that was the moment in the show when the Liberals were looking to score, because they want to spend the last bit of the campaign focusing on the sovereignty referendum. And that exchange is not going to give them momentum going into this offensive.
Terence, it was assumed that Bouchard had the most to lose going into this debate. What was the strategy as he entered into it, and how did he play to that strategy? Well,
clearly Mr. Bouchard's strategy seemed to be to keep his cool, to be forceful, sometimes he was aggressive, clearly, even dealing with Mario Dumont. I think he was people, as you saw, the focus group would generally favored Mario Dumont, and I think Mr. Bouchard was on thin ice when he started beating up on Mr. Dumont, or gave that feeling that he was beating up. But generally, he kept his cool, and that was the number one thing he had to do. You saw Mr. Charest's strategy was clearly he returned to it again and again. He perceives that his biggest problem is that poll result that says that Mr. Charest is not well placed as Premier to defend Quebec's interests in Canada, that Mr. Bouchard always outscores him on that issue. And he returned to that again and again. He tried to bring up instances where he has defended Quebec's interests in the past. He brought up the distinct society question that hurt him, he said, politically in the last election, but he stuck to his guns because that's what was good for Quebec. He reminded us of those television commercials where he was attacked for being a Quebecer, and he stuck with it and defended Quebec's interests. So he was trying to turn the tide on that one key issue where he's perceived to be weaker than Mr. Bouchard.
Chantal, for those of us outside of Quebec who don't see Bouchard all that often, was this typical Bouchard tonight? Bouchard at his best? How would you rate both the strategy he used and the performance?
Well, people who see him only in clips on English television probably don't see much of the Bouchard we saw tonight, because he tends to look angry. Most Quebecers, though, have seen Lucien Bouchard in other situations, and over the past month have seen a smiling premier who goes on variety shows and even seems to be able to laugh at himself, goes into campaign headquarters with women recruit candidates and lets them interrupt what he's saying and smiles as if this is the happiest thing that's happening. So they have been working at making the Premier look friendlier, not as angry, and so far it's worked, and this is the Bouchard that they saw tonight, including after the debate when he came for scrums and looked very relaxed, not at all the intense, sometimes angry man that he can be.
Tell me something, Chantal, about the third man, Mario Dumont. You said before even the debate that he was a winner this time around. Why so? Only 6% in the polls? Why so?
Only 6% in the polls, 1 seat in the National Assembly, and there he got to spend the whole evening on an equal footing with the two main leaders of the province, as if his party was just as credible. That makes already Mr. Dumont the winner of a big shot of credibility. It comes at a time when many voters are wondering if they're very happy with Mr. Charest's campaign, wondering if he's not going to win, maybe they should throw their vote to young Dumont and see what happens. So from that angle, that makes makes him a winner. He only had not to make a fool of himself tonight, to keep what he's got and keep some people interested in voting for him. And I guess he achieved that.
Terence, who could he draw voters away from? Who's he going to hurt the most?
Mario Dumont. I think Mario Dumont draws voters away from, voters who are unhappy with their first choice. If Mr. Bouchard started lashing out, if he was hitting very hard on the referendum and made middle of the road nationalist voters nervous, they would part with Mario Dumont. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing that Mr. Charest is being perceived as not strong enough, not ready enough to defend Quebec's interest, and I think it's much more likely that Liberal voters would say, well, on this, I'm going to move to the sidelines, and in this case, it's Mario Dumont for this election.
As we move into the home stretch now, Terence, what does the PQ still have to worry about?
Well, one thing is Chantal talked about Lucien Bouchard smiling, and he certainly smiles a lot more when he's got his own tracking poll showing that he's very strongly in the lead. When he, is perceived to be in trouble, the smile goes away. And I think certainly there's nothing on the horizon, nothing in the tracking polls that we're hearing about that would make Lucien Bouchard stop smiling and start lashing out.
Chantal, the same reaction?
He has to be careful of one thing. Sovereigntists traditionally in Quebec over the past 15 years win big 2 weeks before the vote, and then their vote levels off. It happened to the Bloc in 1993, happened in the referendum, and so Mr. Bouchard has to campaign to the very end if he hopes to sustain the lead that the polls at this point show him to have.
And some PQ cabinet ministers are saying privately they're worried they're peaking too soon. This is a worry you hear privately from PQ people.
Mind you, it's a nice worry to have if you're sitting on the Liberal benches hoping to get it.
It may be the last straw in the wind that Federalists in Quebec are grasping at this week.
But quickly, both of you do agree it's not over yet, right?
Well, because the vote is on November 30th, it's never over till it's over.
They always say it's over when somebody quotes Yogi Berra.
Well, that was interesting. Thank you both very much.
Good night.
Thanks a lot. Bye.